Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Red Cedar Church. It's good to see each of you here this morning. I want to start off this morning by asking you a question. Now, I want you to think about the answer in your head. Okay, I don't want you to blurt this out. Deal? It's an important caveat, all right? Don't blurt it out, all right? So, I'm going to ask you a question, and you're not going to blurt it out. All right, here we go. What is one of the worst decisions you've ever made in your life? Okay, I want you to think about that. What is one of the worst decisions you've ever made in your life? When I was a kid, I was really good at saving money. I was really good at saving money. I would work hard. I'd bug my parents to do extra chores around the house. I'd bug the neighbors. I'd go up to the neighbors' houses and knock on the doors and try to earn some extra money. I would save my money all year, and I would blow it on the 4th of July on fireworks every single year as a kid. I was really dumb with my finances. I worked really hard. I was really dedicated. And then I would just burn it all up on explosives every year. I could have paid my way through college if I would have been a little more savvy with it. But that was a dumb decision, some big dumb decisions I made when I was a kid. I want you to think about, too, what is one of the best decisions you've ever made in your life? What's one of the best decisions you've ever made in your life? I know for me, March 1st, 1999, I was in 8th grade, and that was when I gave my life to Jesus. That was the best decision I've ever made in my life. My relationship with God, my love, the love that God has given me for His Word has forever changed the trajectory of my life, and I'm so grateful for that. Well, the second best decision I ever made in my life was to marry my wife, Rachel. Hands down. She is a breath of fresh air. To me, she is the embodiment of joy. She is such a blessing to me, a blessing to our family. We've been married for 14 years, and I know this sounds like a Hallmark card, but honestly, each year we are married, it's better and better, and my love for her just grows more and more. Marrying her is one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. And we got married, I think it was about 25 when we got married. And so leading up to us getting married, I feel like we had lots of good conversations about our morals, our values, our faith, our maturity, and our relationship with God, how we wanted, our future to look, kind of priorities and kind of plans for the future, because that's important. We wanted those things to line up, right? And so we had lots of different conversations, and I felt like it was a good decision at the time, but you do your due diligence and you kind of hope everything works out after that, right? Hey, buddy. See you later. It was a fly. And so with that, though, after we got married, my friend Brad, he got married a few years before I did, and Rachel and I were over at him and his wife Kelsey's house, and Rachel was hanging out with his kids and reading book after book after book to his kids. And he looked at me and he said something to me that never crossed my mind up to that point. He said, "Hey, Chad, Rachel's going to be a really good mom one day." And that's something that in my ignorance and in my 20s of something I didn't even think about. And Rachel's an absolutely amazing mom. She's great with our kids. She loves on our kids. She's super patient with our kids. I learn a lot from her every single day with that. And that's something that I say that as we have decisions that we make in our lives that we're intentional about, and we think through different things, right? But then in the midst of us processing and thinking through those decisions and those discernments, God will also kind of come along and bless us in other ways of the small things that turn into big things that we might not have even thought of. So we are going to continue on. We're going to dive into a story in the Old Testament that many of you are very familiar with. You probably heard it in Sunday school as a kid, or read about it in the Bible, or had a Bible study on it. This is one of the more familiar stories in the Bible, but it's one that continues to teach us profound lessons about life, faith, and the decisions that we make. Today we're going to continue to look at the life of Samson, focusing specifically on Judges chapter 16. Samson is often remembered for his incredible strength, his long hair, and his tragic downfall. But as we unpack this story here this morning, I want us to see it through a different lens. I want us to focus on the power of one decision. You see, Samson's life is a vivid example of how the decisions we make can either align us with God's purpose or lead us down a path of destruction. But hear this. Even when we stray, the story of Samson reminds us of God's incredible grace, which is always available to us if we choose to turn to Him. So, as we go through this passage today, I want to highlight 3 key decisions that Samson made, and then want us, after each one, to challenge us to consider the decisions we are making in our own lives. So let's begin by starting out this passage together that tells the story of Samson's relationship with Delilah and the events that led to his downfall. So we're in Judges chapter 16, starting in verse 4. Sometime later, he, Samson, fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The first decision we see Samson make in this passage is the decision to compromise. Samson was a man with a God-given purpose. He was set apart as a Nazirite from birth, which meant that he was dedicated to God in a very special way. As a Nazirite, Samson was to avoid 3 things: contact with the dead, consumption of alcohol, and cutting his hair. His uncut hair was a visible symbol of his commitment to God and the source of his supernatural strength. But Samson had a weakness that led him to compromise. He had a weakness for women. And he made a decision to pursue a relationship with Delilah, a woman from the valley of Sorek. Now, Sorek was Philistine territory, enemy territory. Samson knew that getting involved with a Philistine woman was not in line with God's plan for his life. Yet he chose to compromise. He didn't fall into Delilah's lap by accident. It was a choice. And what's so dangerous about this kind of compromise is that it often seems harmless at first. Samson thought he could handle it. He thought he could flirt with temptation without getting burned. He thought, what's the harm with this one relationship? I'm still strong. I'm still fulfilling my purpose. But here's the thing. Small compromises often lead to big consequences. It might start with seemingly insignificant decisions, but that decision can set off a chain reaction that takes us further and further away from God's purpose for our lives. I think many of us can relate with this. Maybe you've made compromises in your relationships, in your integrity, in your spiritual life. Oftentimes we think it's just this one time, it's not that big of a deal. But these small decisions, they add up. They begin to erode our spiritual strength, just as Samson's compromise began to erode his. So let's continue to read on about the life of Samson. Going again to verse 4. Sometime later, Samson fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, "See if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver." So Delilah said to Samson, "Tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued." Samson answered her, "If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man." Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she tied him with them. With men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Then Delilah said to Samson, "You have made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come now, tell me how you can be tied." He said, "If anyone ties me securely with," looking around the room, "new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man." So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them. Then with, once again, men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the ropes off his arms as if they were threads. Delilah then said to Samson, "All this time you've been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied." He replied, after looking around the room, "If you weave the 7 braids of my head into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with a pin," getting really creative here, "I'll become as weak as any other man." So, while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, wove them into the fabric, and tightened it with the pin. Again, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke from his sleep and pulled up the pin and the loom with the fabric. The second decision that Samson made in this story is the decision to ignore warning signs, right? to ignore warning signs. As we read in this passage, Delilah repeatedly tried to discover the secret of Samson's strength. She asked him 3 times, and each time Samson gave her a creative false answer. He told her that if he were tied with fresh bowstrings, he would become weak. When that didn't work, he said new ropes would do the trick. When that failed, he suggested weaving his hair into a loom. Now you would think that after the first or second time Delilah tried to trap him, Samson would get a clue, right? He should have realized that this woman was not trustworthy. She wasn't in this relationship for love. She was in it for the money. Yet Samson ignored the clear warnings. How many of you, after going through that passage, were like, "What's this guy thinking? Come on, get a clue," right? The warning signs are so clear. What's wrong with you? Can any of us relate with that? I know I can. I think one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about healthy relationships is that I know what it's like to be in a toxic one. So prior to my dating Rachel, getting engaged to Rachel, and marrying Rachel, prior to that relationship, prior to our marriage, I was in a toxic relationship. In my early 20s, there was this girl that even before I asked her out, even before we went on our first date, there were all these warning signs that this is not someone you should date. All these warning signs. And I chose to ignore them, right? And after date, after we were exclusive with each other, it was very clear that this relationship was toxic. Everything was always my fault. Wanted to spend all of her time with me, right? All these kind of red flags of breaking up with me over the smallest things about every other weekend, right? Time after time again. All these warning signs. There was one time where we had been hanging out together like every night after work, and I said, hey, tonight I'm just gonna go back to the house that I live in. I'm gonna catch up on laundry and stuff like that. I'm just gonna kind of do my own thing tonight. She seemed totally cool with that. And so I'm at the house catching up on laundry or whatever, and my friend that I haven't seen in a really long time, who ended up becoming one of my groomsmen, gave me a call and said, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. Would you be up for grabbing dinner tonight? I said, yeah, sure. That'd be great. And so we go out to a restaurant. We're eating dinner, and I get a phone call from my girlfriend. And she's like, where are you at right now? And I said, oh, I'm out to eat with my friend Brian. And she flips out, screaming, cussing, call me all sorts of horrible things on the phone, just absolutely going nuclear on me. I try to calm her down. I can't get a word in. After a while, it was an old phone, so I closed it, right? I closed the phone, put it back in my pocket, and she just keeps on blowing up my phone. So I turn it off, right? And I'm like, oh, what in the world's going on? I'll deal with this later, right? After dinner, I drive back to my house, and guess who's there waiting for me? That's right. Warning, 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 right? Did I break up with her that night? Nope. Right? I ignored the clear warning signs, right? I ignored those signs. Why did Samson ignore them? Perhaps it was pride. Samson had been the strongest man around for so long, he couldn't imagine a situation where he would be vulnerable. Maybe he thought he was invincible, that he could handle anything Delilah threw at him. Or maybe he was blinded by his desires, so focused on what he wanted that he couldn't see the danger right in front of him. How often do we do the same thing? How often do we ignore the warnings that God places in our lives? Maybe it's a friend who sees the path we're on and tries to speak truth into our situation. Maybe it's a sermon or a passage in the Bible that convicts us. Maybe it's a deep feeling and unsettling inside that something isn't right. But instead of heeding those warnings, we push them aside. We tell ourselves, I've got this. I know what I'm doing. But ignoring those warnings are dangerous. It can lead us down a path of destruction, just as it did for Samson. When we ignore the warnings, we place ourselves outside of God's protection. We open ourselves up to the consequences of our own decisions. So what warnings have you been ignoring? Maybe God's been trying to get your attention, but you've been too focused on your own plans and desires to listen to God. I challenge you today to stop, to listen, to consider where God might be warning you to change course. Let's finish the story of Samson. Then Delilah said to him, how can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? Warning, warning. This is the third time you've made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength. With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. So he told her everything. No razor has ever been used on my head, he said, because I have been a Nazirite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man. When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines, come back once more. He has told me everything. So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands. After putting him to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. Then she called, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as before and shake myself free. Listen to this. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they set him to grinding grain in the prison. The third decision that Samson made was to reveal his heart. The final decision that Samson made was the most tragic of all. He revealed the secret of his strength to Delilah. After repeated nagging, Samson finally gave in and told her the truth about his Nazirite vow and the significance of his uncut hair. In doing so, he handed over the very thing that set him apart for God's purpose. He gave away the secret of his strength. Delilah wasted no time. She put Samson to sleep, called in a man to shave off his hair, and his strength left him. The Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him to Gaza, where they put him in chains and forced him to grind grain in prison. The decision to reveal his heart to the wrong person cost Samson everything. He lost his strength, he lost his freedom, and he even lost his sight. But it wasn't just a physical loss, it was a spiritual one too. The Bible says that he did not know that the Lord had left him. Samson's strength was gone because he had broken his commitment to God. If you're a middle schooler or a high schooler here, I want you to pay extra close attention just for these next few minutes. Or if you're single, okay, I want you to pay extra close to this. There's a powerful lesson for us all here, but I especially want to speak to the teenagers and single people in the room. Our hearts are precious. They are the center of our being, the place where God's Spirit dwells, and we need to be very careful with who we trust with our hearts. We need to guard them, not just physically, but spiritually. When we give our hearts away to the wrong things, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a habit, whether it's a desire, we risk losing our spiritual strength. Samson's story reminds us that our strength, our purpose, our identity, it all comes from God. When we stay close to God, when we guard our hearts and remain committed to his ways, we walk in his power. But when we give our hearts away to the things of this world, we distance ourselves from the very source of our strength. So, what have you been giving your heart to? Are there areas of your life where you've let your guard down? Maybe it's time to take a step back and refocus on your relationship with God. Maybe it's time to recommit your heart to God. Now, you might be thinking, Chad, this is a pretty heavy story. Samson's decision led to a lot of pain and loss. Where's the hope in this story? Here's where it is. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza, binding him with bronze shackles. They sent him to grinding grain in prison. Listen to this. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to celebrate, saying, "Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands." When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, "Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste our land and multiplied our slain." While they were in high spirits, they shouted, "Bring out Samson to entertain us." So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them. When they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hands, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so I may lean against them." Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just one more time, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Then Samson reached towards the two central pillars on which the temple stood, bracing himself against them, his right on the one and his left on the other. Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with all of his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. Samson's life didn't end in the prison cell. Even in his weakest moment, when he was blind and in chains, Samson made one last decision, a decision to turn back to God. He prayed, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just one more time." And God, in his grace and mercy, answered the prayer of Samson. Samson's hair began to grow back, a symbol of God's grace and the possibility of redemption, a symbol of hope. In his final act, Samson pushed down the pillars of the Philistine temple, bringing it down on his enemies and himself. And the Bible tells us that he killed more Philistines in his death than he did his entire life. This is the power of one decision. Samson's life was marked by a series of poor decisions, but in the end, he made the decision to turn back to God. And God, in his grace, gave Samson the strength to fulfill his purpose one last time. Maybe you're here today and you feel like you've made too many mistakes, too many bad decisions. Maybe you're carrying the weight of past mistakes and you feel like there's no way back. I want you to hear this. It's not too late. One decision can change everything. One prayer, one moment of surrender can turn your life around. God's grace is bigger than your failures. His love is greater than your mistakes. And just like Samson, you can experience his power in your life if you choose to turn back to him. So as we close, I want to challenge you to make one decision. Make one decision this week. Maybe it's to recommit your life to God, to stop compromising in certain areas of your life, or start listening to the warnings God has been giving you. Maybe it's to guard your heart and refocus on your relationship with him. Whatever it is, don't wait. Today is the day to make that decision. Today is the day to experience the power of God's grace in your life. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you. We thank you for your word. We thank you for the story of Samson, a story that shows us both the consequences of our decisions and the power of your grace. I pray for everyone here today that we would make the decision to follow you with all of our hearts. Help us to recognize the areas where we've compromised, to heed the warnings you've given us, and to guard our hearts. And thank you, Lord, that no matter how many bad decisions we've made, your grace is always enough to bring us back. We ask and pray these things in the name of Jesus. One decision can change everything. Let's go out this week and live in the power of the grace of God. Amen.